Tonight I want to talk about your health and how you can empower yourself to tune into the body and decode some of the messages that it's trying to send us about our well-being so that we can live a more balanced lifestyle, one without the use of any medication or drugs or feeling low energy or any of that sort of stuff. So during tonight's exploration, I want to explore how symptoms manifest to give you better understanding and also why they manifest in our bodies. Through that better understanding, we're able to understand how we can actually heal ourselves naturally. So like I said, without any drugs, without any medication, the power to heal is completely within your hands. And not only just getting rid of illnesses that we all already have, but how can we actually prevent illness and live on purpose? You know, the kind of life that some of us only dream of living. It's really possible. So we need to align body and mind to attain that. So a little bit on me first before we get started. So my name's Ava Leonard. For those of you who haven't met me face to face, I am a body talk practitioner. I'm part of the international body of body talk practitioners, and I'll give you a little bit more information on that later in our talk today. But I think I will first start with just a introduction to how I came around to the holistic health scene. My entrance into the holistic scene wasn't necessarily so graceful. In my early 20s, I had an injury that left me with nerve damage in my spine. And as a result of that, I was left in constant pain. So this kind of started my journey towards looking for someone to help me, somebody to heal me. And so that journey first started with traditional medicine, Western medicine, GP, specialists, that sort of things. And when I was told that only drugs or surgery were my only options, I went searching and knocking on other doors. This went on for a few years and ended, thankfully, with my introduction to body talk. And the basis of this therapy is that body and mind are not separate and that we actually hold all the tools to heal ourselves, which at the time, way back when, was a revolutionary idea to me. I thought, how is it possible that physical pain in my body that's been diagnosed as nerve damage could be healed without the use of really any intervention? So it got me really curious because the pain left my body and the results spoke for themselves. And that is where I started my journey. I went into my first course and the rest is history. We're going to talk about stress. So on one level or another, we all experience stress from time to time. The question is, what kind of stress are we experiencing? So for the purposes of tonight, we're going to define stress as the reaction of your body or your mind to a real or an imagined threatening or challenging event. A real or an imagined event. We'll come back to those keywords. So fun fact about the body. It doesn't actually have enough blood to nourish every tissue with each heartbeat. We can only send blood to 25% of our tissues at a time. So as a result, our body needs to create priorities. What's most important? What's at the top of the list? So the nervous system set these priorities based on perceived needs. And so the catch-22 is stress actually distorts the nervous system's ability to do this because when we experience stress in our body, the nervous system perceives this stress as an absolute priority. And then things begin to start falling through the cracks. And that's when symptoms will present. Physiological response in the body. Let's take a little bit closer of a look at that. So the fight or flight response, which is our stress response when something happens, real or perceived, that requires a response, a reaction to. So the brain processes these signals from our environment beginning in the amygdala, our main fight or flight center, and sends that signal to our hypothalamus, also in the brain. The pituitary then secretes ACTH, and this hormone tells our adrenal glands, which sit on top of our kidneys, to release stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. These might sound familiar to you. Adrenal fatigue, too. Often linked to stress, right? Stress, we're overworked, we're overstressed, we're churning our body too hard, and these are the two culprits, cortisol and adrenaline. So physically, our body has a lot of different reactions to these hormones being secreted in our body. The bladder is relaxed, our heart rate will increase. You might notice that you're breathing from high up on your chest. Not quite hyperventilating most of the time, but if you're breathing from up here, that's a signal that your body is actually stressed out. Perhaps you're unaware of it. It also slows our digestion, which is a big one. So when we are stressed, our body tells all of the energy to go to our limbs. And when the energy gets sent to our limbs, it actually allows us to run away from danger. Perceived or real, it doesn't matter. The body thinks there's danger, so it tells us to get up and go. And what that does is take away from our vital organs stored in our torso. So digestive organs are part of that package. So back to those keywords, real and perceived. So real stress, it's a good thing. It gets us out of real physical danger. So back in the caveman days, when there's a saber-toothed tiger running at you, your body tells you to get up and go fast. But the fact of the matter is, in our modern lifestyle, there's not actually that much danger at foot. There might be a car hurling at you, or you step out from the sidewalk a little bit too quickly, and it's your fight or flight response that quickly gets you back onto the pavement away from the car that's barreling at you. Maybe you can think of other real examples in your life. One really good example that I had in my life that really demonstrated this fight or flight response was when I was camping. And I was there with my sister, and it was the middle of the night. And we had just kind of fallen off to sleep. And all of a sudden I hear just a subtle footstep outside the tent. I was like, immediately like, oh my God. But my sister's like a crazy bush woman, so I was like, okay, if she's not worried, then I'm not worried. And I just nudged her awake and I said, hey, Chloe, like, do you hear that? Just not with actual words, but just with my eyes and kind of going like that. And all of a sudden I see her eyes go like this, and she starts to reach for her knife really slowly beside us in the tent. And I swear to God, in that moment, it went from like half asleep in a split second to the most alert that I possibly could have been, because my body thought I was in actual physical danger. The adrenaline started pumping. I was wide awake. All my senses were heightened. So that's an example of real danger. Thankfully, we were not eaten by a bear that night. The fact of the matter is, most of our stress is just mind-made. It's perceived. We make it up with the stories that we tell ourselves. So paying bills, huge trigger. Finances for people cause massive stress in their lives. Traffic is another big one. Unsatisfying work. If you don't like your job, that's going to take a toll on your state of being. Relationships are another huge one. So whether it's getting married and there's a bridezilla at foot, or mother-in-law that you just can't stand, or kids, all these things are causing stress within our system. We don't live in a silo. The things outside us affect us. Emotional trauma is another really big one that I want to draw awareness to, because emotional trauma doesn't necessarily need to be experienced in the moment. Emotional trauma can linger from years and years prior if it had never fully been processed. So for example, say you get in an argument with your spouse, and rather than fully hash it out and say how you feel and come to some sort of resolution, you just bottle it up and push it down, and the next morning you kind of sweep it under the rug. That's going to hang on in your body. Same for childhood trauma, that sort of thing. So we need a way to start looking at what is it that's stressing us out and how can we deal with it more effectively. For a short amount of time, stress is totally fine. So like we talked about real physical danger, it's fine. The body's actually designed to handle it. And that's why some people can work these crazy jobs where they're working, 10 hours a day, or they've got 3 kids at home and trying to pay the bills, this sort of thing. But when it persists, something's got to give. Like we said, the body is creating priorities. So what is it that gives? It's different for every single person. If we can't enter that state of rest and recovery where we are pulled out of our sympathetic nervous system, that fight and flight mode, into a state of rest and recovery, our parasympathetic nervous system, all sorts of symptoms can present. So this is just an example, a smattering. So like we talked about digestive disorders, your digestion is suppressed because all of the body's resources are going to your limbs. So that can be anything from indigestion to heartburn to stomach ulcers, autoimmune, Crohn's, that sort of thing. Mood disorders, anxiety is rampant in our society. Depression, feeling just generally unbalanced. Lack of sleep would be another symptom. Sore back, tight muscles from sitting, at your desk all day. Menstrual problems is another huge one that I see in clinic, and irregular cycles or no cycles, endometriosis. These are all signs and symptoms that your body is not happy. There's something going on in your life that is begging for attention, and it just wants us to listen. So essentially what all of these different symptoms are pointing to is just an overall suppressed immune function. Our immune system is actually there to keep us in balance and healthy. But when stress presents, the immune system can't actually do its job. So what I want to suggest tonight and give you guys more information on is how we can use the power of observation simply by noticing and observing where the stress is in our life in order to create miraculous change. So one way to do that, work out what your stress signals are so that you can begin to actually perceive when your body is in stress. So for one person, that might be social isolation. When you get really stressed, some people will just hole up and they don't go out and they don't speak to anyone. They don't have any energy to do it. For other people, it could be the polar opposite. They could actually go out partying, start to, abuse their bodies with alcohol and cigarettes and overly using and depending on caffeine in order to feel lifted and alive in the world. These are going to be completely different for every single person. Difficulty sleeping is a massive one. Although it is quite normal to either not be able to fall asleep at night or waking up in the middle of the night, just because it's normal doesn't mean it's healthy. And so we need to start having an honest conversation with ourselves. Breathing is another one that we spoke of earlier. So when your breathing is from up here in your chest, straight away, there's some level of stress going on in the body. A healthy breath actually comes from the lower abdomen. So your belly will rise and fall on the back of the breath. Have you ever seen a baby in a crib lying there really peacefully? As they inhale, the belly will rise like a little Buddha belly, and as they exhale, the belly gently falls. It's not a forced motion. It happens naturally. So this is the first bit of homework that I'd like to leave with you today. Tune in, see what you lean on in times of stress so that you can actually begin to identify where the stress is coming from. Well, this in itself isn't really a solution. The unconscious mind massively affects our state of being. So for those of you who haven't seen a diagram like this iceberg diagram before, this concept was created by Carl Jung. And underneath the surface of the water is meant to represent the unconscious mind, which is about 90%. And above the surface of the water is our conscious mind, 10%. So that 10%, excuse me, that 10% is what we can consciously relate back, what we can share, what we know are our stressors, things that we know to be true. Beneath the surface of the water is our unconscious. So these are things that we can't identify on our own. So things in our unconscious would be habits. Fears often lie in our unconscious, fear of failure, fear that I'll never be enough, fear that I'll be a bad father, fear that I won't get that promotion that I'm going for because that other person is more attractive than me. Crazy stuff. Our unconscious is not discriminating. Our unconscious will just soak up beliefs and attitudes from all around us in our environment. Things in the unconscious can actually be things that we consciously disagree with. So, for example, behaviors that you pick up in your childhood or things that your parents believe in. Say, for example, your parents are very conservative and you're very liberal. Well, if you were raised in a very conservative, politically conservative household, odds are your subconscious picked up some of those beliefs and accepts them to be true, even though your conscious mind is quite politically liberal. So basically, we need a way to explore what's beneath the surface of the water, to get a fuller picture of what is it that's making us stress, what is it that's causing our body harm. I love this quote. So Albert Einstein said, "Invention is not product of logical thought, even though the final product is tied to a logical structure." So what this is pointing to is, you get to the end result that you're looking for, but how you get there isn't necessarily logical until you get to the end, of course, and then hindsight is 20/20. So to better demonstrate what I'm talking about, I want to give you guys some stories as we go through our talk tonight. The first one is a client that I saw, and her symptoms that she was presenting with were adrenal fatigue and thyroid dysfunction. So she described herself to be constantly tired. Her blood sugar was completely shot and dysregulated. She chronically fell ill. She was suffering depression and anxiety. And at the age of just 27, she was put on a high dose of hormones normally given to women only at menopause. She was taking around 20 different supplements and on a very strict diet, but nothing was working. One naturopath actually turned her away, saying, "There's nothing I can do for you." Her symptoms were so difficult to manage that she actually had to quit her job, and in that process, she gained around 30 kilos, and her insomnia was severe. So kind of a mixed bag, not the sort of bag that you want to be carrying. So in our work, exploring the unconscious and seeing what was going on there, I'll go back to that slide. We discovered some very interesting beliefs that her conscious mind did not necessarily agree with. So one of the beliefs were, I need to be sick in order to be loved. I need to be sick in order to be loved, which, believe it or not, is actually a really common belief, because when we're young, when we're sick, we get all of the attention in the world that we desire. Our parents care for us in a way that, they probably wouldn't otherwise, not because they don't love us, but because they have busy lives. So our unconscious mind starts to develop these unconscious beliefs. There was also, we discovered in her sessions, that she was feeling like a burden, and she also felt like other people wouldn't understand her because of her health problems. There was a belief system sitting there that she's actually unworthy of good health. So when we have these beliefs in our subconscious sitting there beneath the water, this will start to be reflected in our environment and in our experience of life. Because what the mind believes, the body reflects. So the body was simply just reflecting what her unconscious mind believed. What else did we discover? Very interesting case. There's also a core belief that life is unfair, which is very much what her body and her life circumstance was reflecting. We also cleared a belief around I was born weak and unable to cope with the demands of life. So all of these beliefs beginning to reflect in her body, reflect in her environment. We also did a little bit of physical balancing as well, because the physical body is part of the equation. We can't separate the mind from the body. So we worked with an allergy to dairy and did some work with the endocrine system, her pineal gland, to support her sleep patterns, and liver functioning combined with some other organs to synchronize the communication. As a result, her sleep patterns are steadily improving, she's losing weight, her menstrual cycle is back to regular, and her blood sugar levels are leveling out. She also reports that her energy levels are back to normal, and she's actually planning to start working again. So huge, massive changes can happen when we start to acknowledge, what is it that's hanging out in my unconscious? What do I really believe? And simply just by observing, the body starts to shift. The body listens to what's happening in our unconscious as we begin to become more aware of it. Undoubtedly, our modern lifestyle puts huge pressure on us, perceived pressure anyways, which can feel very real, and it's valid, right? So whether it's deadlines at work or mortgage payments or, conflict with your spouse or your kids or your colleagues, we're constantly being bombarded from all these different angles. Sometimes you might even say, oh, I want to go and live somewhere more simple. I know I've said that in the past, but when I ask my heart, is that truly what I want? Do I want to remove myself from, being part of this world? The answer is no. So how do we cope? I love this quote by Alan Watts. He says, I'll tell you what hermits realize. If you go off into a far, far forest and get very quiet, you'll come to understand that you're actually connected to everything. So what he's pointing at here is it doesn't matter where you go, in some way you're still connected and you're still going to be affected by it. So I'll give you another story that really well demonstrates this point. In this case, I was working with a business owner. He didn't have physical problems per se. He had more problems with staff. And the problem that we were working with in this case was that his company needed to roll out a new project across the departments. And he felt like the department heads, managers, weren't implementing what he asked for quickly enough, and that they were actually doing a pretty poor job. And he was confused. He's like, I don't understand what's happening. How can I work through this? Because it was stressing him out. As we looked closer into the problem and started to dip down into his unconscious, we discovered that he had a belief. Again, beliefs in the unconscious, not something that he was consciously aware of. So the belief said, if I trust, nothing will get done. But the hard work, own personal effort. So can you see how his unconscious was actually creating the work for him? By homing these beliefs in his unconscious, the staff weren't actually being empowered to do the task that he asked for. His unconscious were speaking through his actions, and what we discovered was that he was actually micromanaging his staff, and they felt unequipped to execute what he had asked. So after we cleared all this up and brought it up above the surface of the water into his consciousness, within a week, the program was rolled out. he implemented better communication and incentive plans, and overnight, done, no problem. So self-awareness is a really powerful tool if you haven't already begun to notice. And there's different methods in which we can begin to become more self-aware, both of what's going on consciously and unconsciously. So one way to become more self-aware is through our body feedback. So we've already talked about breathing. So am I breathing from up here or am I breathing from my belly? It's a very quick sign to tell you, yes, I'm stressed, or no, I'm not. Or if you want to get more creative with it, tune into how you feel when you're in different environments. Being in the office might make you feel different to how you are outside, to how you are at your mother-in-law's house, to how you feel when you're in the lounge room at your house. So how are these different environments affecting you? How are you perceiving that environment? What sort of stress are you incurring from being in these different environments? Or even more creative, you might notice that you get a pain in your jaw every time your father calls, or right before you go into a meeting, you might notice, oh, I'm getting really just flips in my belly, butterflies, that sort of thing. What does that mean? Ask yourself, what must I believe for this to be true? Because, of course, not everybody that goes into a meeting gets that feeling. It could be a belief around judgment from others, being afraid to be seen, this sort of thing. And it's different for everyone, so this is why we have to become our own detectives. Beginning to observe our story or our mind chatter, what's going on in our mind, is another incredibly powerful tool. So if you haven't already noticed, there's an MC to your life, DJing, all the events. And sometimes it's really simply like, okay, I'm done that, now I've got to do this. It's actually being vocalized in your mind. On a more subtle, perhaps more complex level, you could be making up stories around, oh, that person should have been more considerate to me, or I can't believe that my mother wouldn't call on my birthday, or I can't believe my best friend canceled last minute. And these are all judgments, attitudes, beliefs that cause us stress. And perhaps if they were fleeting in and out, it would be okay, at least for a short amount of time. But the thing is, we, as humans, have this habit of continuing the story. We're attached to it. So rather than letting it go, for example, oh, my friend canceled last minute, that's okay. No, for many of us, it will become a story. Or, you didn't get that promotion at work. It becomes a story and then a grudge towards someone. So we need to start to observe and let go of these stories. And then, of course, there's tools to actually tap in and help us on this journey. So I know what some of you might be thinking. Shit, she's going to tell me to meditate. And yes, I am going to tell you to meditate because it's a really powerful, more self-aware. But if that's not for you, if you're not ready for that, you don't have to start straight away. There are ways around it. I will point out, though, that there's mountains and mountains of research on mindfulness and changes in the brain. And when we're able to meditate and become more mindful, our body begins to move away from unhealthy emotion like anger and anxiety and move toward the sense of calm and peace and overall well-being. So if that sounds like something you might like, meditation is a good option. And it can be really simple. It can be as simple as counting the breath in and counting the breath out. If you want to relax, the best thing to do is focus on your out breath. So that, say you are a bit highly strung, you're noticing that you're breathing from your chest, it could be a simple actually sigh it out. Trust me, it feels really, really good. If you want to get a bit more fancy with it, you could count the breath. 1, 2, 3, 4 in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out. And as we extend the out breath, it drops us out of our sympathetic nervous system, that fight and flight, into our rest and recovery mode, relaxing the body, releasing tension. Brené Brown. She's absolutely incredible. If you haven't seen her TED Talk on vulnerability, I highly recommend it. So she says, you're imperfect and you're wired for struggle, but you are absolutely worthy of love and belonging. So to share there's also a belief there that I am not worthy of love, and there is this fear of being criticized or judged. So we needed to bring that up into her awareness, into her consciousness, and simply by doing that, the pain in the shoulder gone. With the bloating, it was linked to this inability to receive. So receiving is an energy, and it doesn't matter what you're receiving, whether it's money or love or abundance. Receiving is just an energy. And how else do we receive? We receive by eating. We put food in our body, we receive. And so because she had this overall impaired ability to receive, every time she ate, bloating happened because her body didn't know how to receive it. After we uncovered that, along with some beliefs like I'm not worthy of praise, I'm not good enough to get what I want, all beliefs circling around this concept of receiving, the bloating began to dissipate. So some other tools for self-observation. Journaling is a really powerful way to work out what's happening in our subconscious. What can we uncover simply by psychometric testing is another really powerful tool for self-observation. So things like the Enneagram, if you haven't read about that, it's really incredible. And it's so with psychometric testing, whether it's the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs, like that, it just gives us a way to understand our patterns, our habits, our personality, and then we can begin to see the patterns of each subconscious. Incredibly honest beings. So, you know, whether it's your kids or your partner or your colleagues or, you know, even the stranger at the checkout at the chemist, rather than immediately it and decide, oh no, that's that's not me, you know, because sometimes the truth is not things that we want to hear necessarily. They can be negative aspects of ourselves. Try and pause and give yourself a moment to just consider whether it can be true. And if you want to dive deeper, professional help is out there. Of course. To work towards who we want to be, we need to have a really good understanding of who we currently are. And that includes the conscious and the subconscious, above and below the water. And we need to fully accept who we are and who we've been as well in order to get to where we want to go. Very quickly, just to recap on the topic of stress, our body perceives a real or imagined threat, and it will prioritize, our nervous system will prioritize that threat as an emergency. As this fight or flight response is activated, the body needs to secrete stress hormones, and if the stress persists, the body is unable to enter that state of rest and recovery where the immune system is functioning at optimum capacity and keeping us healthy. So if disease or dis-ease presents, it doesn't need to be physical. Self-awareness can help us to reduce or completely eliminate the stress in our body and allow that self-healing mechanism, our immune system, to take hold once again. So I promised I would come back to body talk and give you guys a bit more information on that. So what I've discussed so far, it's very much through the lens of how we work as body talk practitioners. Essentially, all we're doing in body talk sessions, one-on-one with clients, is bringing your nervous system out of that emergency mode so that the natural healing process can resume that immune function. So as we discussed, both through self-observation and the observation of others, the stress is reduced and the body heals. It's really as simple as that. We're just bringing your body and your mind and your soul into balance. Body talk was originally developed by a man named John Beltline, who is actually Australian. He was once the director of the Brisbane College of Acupuncture. And when he first developed body talk, it was through his own health struggles. He was diagnosed with Epstein-Barr, and which is normally not necessarily something that is so dangerous or incurable, but his virus kept cropping up again and again and again, and he kept getting fevers. And basically, the medical system, the hospital was just like, we don't know what to do with you. We can't get your fevers down. There's not much we can do to help. So he was sent home with, you know, it could be a death warrant, you know. If our body's overheated and our fevers can't be reduced, we're in trouble. So that motivated him to create what we now call body talk. Body chemistry and immune balancing technique was the very first body talk technique to be developed. So he took body talk over to America about 30 years ago, and the largest community of body talk practitioners still resides in North America. It's still up and coming here in Australia, so it's nice to be on the forefront of that movement. And as body talk practitioners, we're very lucky because we get to draw on a whole array of different natural therapies. John Beltline studied acupuncture, naturopathy, chiropractics, Chinese medicine, homeopathy, applied kinesiology, neuroscience, like you name it, that man has dipped his toes in. So back to the unconscious. How can we become more aware of this? And in body talk, we work with simply becoming aware of the story. So the theory goes, your body holds a record of absolutely everything that has ever happened to you from the moment you were conceived to this very moment right now. Your body holds that record. And really even further back than that, because we have DNA, we have genes, we can dip back into our ancestral history. So we simply need to ask the body what's going on. Wayne Dyer, very smart man. The state of your life is nothing more than a reflection of your unconscious mind. He has a really good talk called The Biology of Belief. So a story to highlight this quote, I worked with an actor. When we found each other, she had spent over $1,000 on voice coaches, voice classes, doctors, all trying to figure out why she kept experiencing pain in her throat and why her voice would always fade away and become hoarse. And she did. You could hear it when I first met her. It was very like rough the way that she talked. It wasn't smooth. It seemed strained. She also had difficulty expressing anger. So as we dug into her unconscious and asked her body, what the heck is going on here? We uncovered a belief. The less waves I create, the more likely I am to get what I want. So it was like this suppression of her self-expression, throat, voice, all linked together. There was also a memory that we uncovered that was still holding true. So an emotional trauma from when she was a young girl and her father died. And rather than expressing her anger and sadness during that period, it was suppressed and actually held on to in the body. Very interestingly, we also looked at an 8th chakra. So in Body Talk, we work not only with the physical, mental body, but we also work with the energetics of the body. So the 8th chakra is part of the system that runs up and down the spine, the main chakras anyway. And the 8th sits over top the head, and it's linked to our past lives. And so in this past life that we acknowledge, she was a Jew, and there was a lot of anger suppressed because in that lifetime, she wasn't able to express herself fully. So simply by acknowledging these things in her session, the pain in her throat was gone, and she hasn't had any problems speaking clearly since. That was in just one Body Talk session. She also reported feeling more open and honest, even opening up to her mother and speaking about her past, whereas before she felt like she couldn't fully express herself. So very powerful, this subconscious that we speak of. Very interesting what we discover. Another example is success. So being part of the Western world, I think a lot of us have ideas about success. Oh, we have a question. Give me a sec. Is there a name for storing of the pain in the body, physically, energetically, etc.? Good question. It probably depends on which therapist you talk to. I just call it storing into the subconscious. There's no specific name that I would call it. The yogis, if you're often in the yoga class, will say, "Oh, we're going to do deep hip opening because we're storing, cellular memory, maybe you could call it, storing emotions in our hips." And if you would have told me that 10 years ago, I would have said, "Oh, you're full of shit." But now I see it come up all the time in both my own Body Talk sessions and that with clients, and the results that follow are profound. So yeah, maybe cellular memory would be a name for storing the pain in the body. Back to success. So we all have ideas of what success is and how great it's going to be, or it's evil and it shouldn't be desired. Whatever you believe, we all have our beliefs up here. You can use this as an exercise. What do you believe about success? And then looking beneath the surface of the water, it could be things like disappointment, not getting what you desire and feeling really beat up about that and maybe suppressing some of that disappointment. Failure, needing to sacrifice. I see it a lot of the time, people justifying in their mind why it's okay to sacrifice time with their kids or time with their significant other in order to climb the ladder. Is it really worth it? These are the hard questions that we need to start asking ourselves, really looking at what's lying in the unconscious and being ready to face it. So if your body could talk, what would it say? The body and the mind are not separate, they're inseparable. So each part of our body typically holds on to a different kind of emotion or a different kind of memory. So the heart, for example, is our center for love, connection, joy, compassion, forgiveness or lack of forgiveness. It will begin to weigh down on the heart. You know, things like heartbreak. It's not a surprise that people who have been emotionally and mentally abused will have heart problems. It's a thing. Shoulders are an area where people often house that feeling of responsibility, you know, the saying, carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Often these common catchphrases, they're they're there for a reason. They've come out of experience. So if you always have tight shoulders, you might feel, if you ask yourself, am I holding a lot of responsibility? Do I feel like I'm carrying a lot of burden? Another story for you. Just a few more, I promise. So this is a testimonial. After my first body talk appointment, for the very first time in 7 years, I got my period. After seeing countless doctors, specialists, taking pills and potions, nothing had helped. I did nothing different except see you. Pretty incredible. So in that first session, we did very little work on the actual physical body. The subconscious was creating these symptoms. We did some work through the heart chakra. So there was a lot of guilt sitting here over not doing things for herself, putting herself second. There was an inability to express how she felt as well, and a feeling like she needed to show up in a certain way. So just always worrying about other people rather than herself. And a cellular memory, an active memory that we looked at was clearing her past around her parents moving overseas. And during that time in her life, she felt abandoned. She was just a young woman still. Her parents moved overseas for work, and she adopted the belief, I'm not capable of doing this alone. And she was feeling overwhelming anxiety that persisted from that point forward. After we brought all these things into awareness, since we had a better understanding of what the story was, our body was able to shift. It was brought out of that stress mode, and the immune system did its thing. So things that we wouldn't typically consider related to that natural healing function, such as the regulation of our menstrual cycles, are very much related to that body's natural healing mechanism. Our bodies are magnificent. They can do anything that we need them to do. Some more examples of different parts of the body. So the liver is often holding on to anger. If you have a very angry disposition, your liver is probably the organ that's holding on to it for you. Kidneys often store fear. So if there's any dis-ease related to your kidneys, you might ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What am I fearful of? What am I avoiding? Another story. Listen to your heart. It knows everything. So the heart is kind of like the head honcho of the body. If we can ask the heart what's going on and synchronize the heart with the brain, these are two of our brains, so to speak, the body will begin to balance. So this client that I saw, he and his wife were trying to conceive, and doctors had diagnosed him, the husband, as infertile, not possible to conceive. They had been trying and had been putting a lot of stress on their relationship. And so as we dug down into the session, we discovered that there was a sporting injury in his early 20s that needed to be brought into his awareness so his body could heal from that trauma. And we also did some balancing around his need to figure things out so that he could relax and be less attached to the outcome. And listening to his heart, We did some heart chakra balancing, so on an energetic level, helping to bring harmony so that he could, again, let go and trust that extra layer that needed to be addressed. Absolutely incredibly, even blew me away. 1 week later, they fell pregnant. And 3 months later, I got this in my email inbox. The body can heal anything, period. So it doesn't matter what your symptom is, chronic pain, lack of sleep, infertility, digestive problems, irregular periods, nerve damage, pain, you name it. The root cause is always something deeper. The body, when we experience a physical symptom, is kind of like the end of the line. Our beliefs have been trying to tell us what's going on in our mind. Our energy levels have probably been speaking up to us. So we're looking at what's going on in the unconscious. What's at the root cause? And simply reminding our body what stopped it from working properly in the first place. So in that way, we don't have to diagnose with body talk. We don't have to label any symptoms. So as we've been seeing through all these examples, the main focus in the session, the root cause, the unconscious part, is often seemingly unrelated to what our conscious complaint is, the main complaint that we report. So I kind of see the body as like a box of IKEA furniture. You know, it's like we have all the pieces, they're all right in front of us, within our reach. But the question is, how the hell do we put this thing back together again? It's like Humpty Dumpty. And, you know, sometimes the instruction pamphlet is a bit vague, so we need a bit of extra help. And that's where Body Talk comes in, because with Body Talk, we are able to give you a technicolor, super detailed encyclopedia instruction pamphlet of how the hell to put your body back together again. How can we rewire the brain in order to create change in our body? All disease and dysfunction on some level is reflected in our brain. Neuroscience is a fairly new discipline, and we're only beginning to understand the power of our brain. Change is actually made possible through neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to actually create new neural pathways and adapt to its needs, creating actual physical change in our bodies. So some examples of like neuroplasticity these days, you know, there's cases of people with ADD being cured, spinal cord injury, stroke, chronic pain, anxiety, depression, all being cured through the power of neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to rewire. And this is essentially what's happening in a Body Talk session. We're rewiring your brain, we're rewiring your consciousness, and in that, the body will follow suit. Last story I will share with you this evening. I was working with a young girl, age 7 at the time, and this young girl was actually 100% healthy till around age 3.5. And at age 3.5, she had full language skills, no problem communicating. And then what seemed like almost overnight, her speech began to regress. And later, she was diagnosed with both autism and ADD. The mother also reported kind of like violent behavior, unsociable behavior with her peers, and it got to the point where she actually needed to be taken out of school. As we looked into her unconscious, asking her body what's going on, we discovered that her nervous system was overstimulated. So we did a lymphatic clearing, that's our body's waste filtration system, through her central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, in order to reduce that overstimulation. We balanced some of her internal organs, so her kidneys, her small intestine, her liver, things like this. And then we cleared a belief. The belief said, I am not like the rest. So, you know, unconsciously, her mind started telling her, I'm different, and that's what the body reflected. We also did a balancing around her thyroid from an energetic perspective. So the thyroid sits over top our throat chakra, which is responsible for communication, communicating with others. And so doing that balancing through the throat, her vocabulary, her speech, her ability to interact began to improve too. And after just one session, her social skills completely changed. This is one of the most incredible cases I've seen so far. Her mother said it was like having a new daughter at home. There were some really poignant examples she gave. One, they were at the zoo and they were in a large group. There was a presenter talking to all the kids there and they were huddled around, and he asked a question, and the young girl that I was working with put her hand up, said, "Me, I'll answer," and in front of the whole group she spoke, which, you know, her mom's eyes, and she told me this story, they're just like popping out of her head, like she couldn't believe it. A few days later, they were at the park, and the young girl was speaking to a boy on the swings, just, you know, jabbering on, really friendly chatter, completely out of character for this young girl. And it actually got to the point recently where her mom said that she's actually going to start going back to school. So after the succession of a few sessions, not only did she seemingly overcome her autism, she was actually being reintegrated back into her normal life. And so we need to start thinking outside the box. We know the body can heal things like cuts on our arm and, you know, common cold, flu, that sort of thing, but our bodies can actually heal a whole lot more of what we've been told is possible. In order to allow the body to heal, we simply need to figure out what the heck is stopping it, what is getting in the way, what is causing my stress. Body talk practitioner, I'm simply trained to listen. And so I don't actually come in with an agenda. I allow your body to guide the session. So as a patient, the power is in your hands. We're just allowing the natural healing response to do its thing. During the session, I use muscle checking, so a biofeedback technique, and that technique will allow your arm to give me a yes or no response as I ask a set of structured questions. So the questioning is the exact same for every single person. This itty bitty chart here, which don't worry, there's no test, you don't need to know the details, but it's just showing you so that you get an idea of the questioning process. It's very structured, so there's a lot of left brain happening, but then there's also the intuitive side of body talk. So the chart takes us so far, and then your body and me need to intuit what is it specifically. And the muscle checking gives us a safeguard, a second confirmation that yes, that is true, yes, that is what we need to focus on. And so by uncovering these items, both conscious and unconscious, your immune system begins to heal your body. And as we've seen through all these cases, no two bodies are the same. Never, ever. I've seen hundreds of people, and I've never, ever had two people alike having the same story underlying their dis-ease, even if their dis-ease presenting is identical. So this is our current paradigm that we're working from in healthcare. This is the traditional paradigm. So we're looking at the symptoms presented, and we're diagnosing based on schooling and what's worked for other patients. Based on that diagnosis, the practitioner will prescribe an intervention or a therapy. And you know, that intervention or therapy could be different. So with a doctor, you would be getting a pill or a suggestion for surgery, something like that. With a naturopath, it's a bit different. It's more holistic. There's nothing wrong with naturopaths. I see naturopaths myself. They serve their purpose just as Western medicine doctors do. But things with naturopaths or TCM doctors, you'd be getting a specific herb. And again, it's working from this symptom paradigm. We're looking at symptoms and trying to diagnose based on what's worked with others. But the problem is there's so much room for error at each one of those levels. There's so much possibility at each level It's very hard to hit the nail on the head and get the right diagnosis and the right herb or the right pill, etc., etc. So what we suggest with Body Talk is to actually stop treating the symptoms. This is a completely new paradigm for looking at our health and our well-being. Remove the guesswork, go straight to the source, ask the client's body, what's going on here, what's stressing it out, and then simply entrusting the body to heal itself. So the body's ability to heal is profound. You know, with Body Talk, we acknowledge a lifetime of accumulated trauma from that very first moment that you're born to this moment right now, and how that's interacting with daily stress, emotions, beliefs, things going on in your environment, with your relationships, etc., etc. What's hindering your body's natural healing process? And so essentially, we're just working to liberate you from anything that's holding you back, whether that's physical illness, relationship breakup, addiction, low self-esteem, self-imposed beliefs, emotional trauma, you name it, we can look at it because your body holds that record. Your body has the answer. And through the session, we look at absolutely everything that stands in your way of being joyful, of being connected, of being free, abundant. So I hope this motivates you in one way or another to take life and your health into your hands. I hope it gives you hope, knowing that you have all the answers. So if you have any questions about absolutely anything we went over today, please reach out to me in an email or you can ring me. Sessions are available one-on-one or via Skype. So similar to an in-person appointment, the only difference is I focus on you on a distance appointment and I muscle test on myself. You get the exact same information in the session, the exact same results. The example that I gave of the girl with autism and the example that I gave of the couple trying to conceive, both distance appointments. I never actually met those people in person. Do any of the participants live on the call have any questions before we wrap it up tonight? I feel like I've done a lot of talking. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening and attending. If you have any questions, like I said, just reach out or you can visit my website, bewellhealthcollective.com. Have a great day. Bye, guys.